welcome to the S.O.A.P Bible Study video series from Oak Tree Community Church in South Bend, Indiana. We're starting a brand new study, this time through one of the, honestly, most depressing books of the Bible.
You know, I knew I liked it for a reason.
Sometimes we do really, really exciting books, really exciting narratives.
This is exciting.
This one is exciting, but it's also...
Not in a good way.
It can be very depressing. And no, we're not talking about Ecclesiastes.
Yeah, that's true. Or Song of Solomon. Or Song of Songs. Yeah. Right, we're talking about the book of Job.
Book of Job.
Yeah.
Book of Job.
So this is always the exciting part, right? Because we get to go into the who, what, where, why, how beforehand, which always used to drive me crazy. but now it's my most favorite part on why is this book even in the Bible? Why is it here? The background. But even before we do that, if you had to give a sentence or two on what the book of Job is about, what would you say?
Well, I wrote down what I...
You did.
I would say, and I want to read how I said it. It gives us insight into, I listed three things, into human nature, how we tend to skew theology based on all sorts of different things, right? Because there's some really good theology in this book that gets misapplied badly.
Right.
And thirdly, how we should respond when things happen that we don't understand and we can't control. Right? I think those are three big things that we can take away from this book.
So I went with, this book gives us wisdom on how God and Satan interact with us.
Yeah.
Which is really, so it's kind of cool. I see you took the human side of it, looking for theology on what God is doing, and I'm taking, hey, God and Satan, things are happening, and how do we apply that into our lives?
Because they really are two of the major players in chapters 1 and 2.
Yeah, but that carries through the whole book.
It's true, but God is, we've done Esther before, and God's not mentioned in the book at all, right? God is mentioned all the way through Job, but after chapter 2, God himself doesn't speak until chapter 38. So like this whole thing is he's like this third person. They're talking about him, they're talking to him, but there's zero response. And Satan doesn't show up again after the first couple of chapters. And so it's like God withdraws almost, and it is a very human
and it gives
experience.
The people time to let us figure it out.
Yeah,
right.
Lots of space,
which will drive you nuts.
But you're right. There's a lot of space there. There's a lot of discussion. There's a lot of wrestling, and we're going to try in this series.
That's exactly what I was going to say. Try to get into those.
We're going to try to wrestle with some of these things because these are still questions that we ask and often don't have answers for, even today. And so this is going to be an important.
So here's the deal. We all want God to be faithful. We want God to be just, well, with other people, not us, but with other people. But we would expect things like, if I'm loving God, I would expect love in return and respect in return. So what happens when that doesn't happen? And that's what happens to Job.
Yeah,
and it's kind of, and there's some choices, and what happens when God says to Satan, go ahead. It's okay, just don't kill him.
Yeah.
And he's talking about us.
Yeah.
Do we yell at God? Is that okay? Do we not believe in God anymore that we're yelling at? And how does that work if we're yelling at him?
Right.
Let's see, do we no longer believe that a true God would do this to us?
Yeah.
And those are questions that are like, can we ask those questions? And they're asked here.
What's interesting is that here at Oak Tree, our motto or our slogan or whatever you want to call it, our mission is helping people know Jesus better and love him more. Know him better, love him more.
Right. So how do you know Jesus?
Through the things that we study and the things that we experience.
Yeah, exactly.
Right? And so what Job does, and of course this is long before the cross. This is long time before the church started. There's no church in here. In fact, we'll talk about this in the background of the book. There's no Israel in here yet. This is a long time ago. There's a lot of stuff that we know today that they didn't know. But there's a ton of really, really great theology in here. And like I said earlier, it just gets misapplied, it's misunderstood, it's skewed. They grab a little piece of something and go off in a direction that you and I look at that and say, now, how did you get there? And we're like, okay, but we're 3,000 years later and we have a whole Bible.
Yeah. Yep.
But these things that we go through are supposed to help us know him better so that we can love him more.
Right.
But we have a lot of the same questions that Job had.
Yeah. So I know we take things literally, grammatically, historically. Do you think that these events that happened to Job happened to him, or is this because there's some tragic things that happen, like all in a row here.
Yeah.
And if you were trying to make up statements about God, you would want to have a tragic event that happened.
Yeah, sort of like a Shakespearean play. There's a tragedy. There's the resolve and sort of legendary. What's interesting is that the first 2 chapters and the last are written in a narrative prose. Okay, it's not poetic. It's not Shakespearean. It's not a song like we've seen in other books. It's actually written as a narrative. There's nothing in the text.
Then this happened. Then
Yeah,
that happened.
exactly. There's nothing in the text that would make us, if we just sat down to read it, make us think, oh, there's a lot of hyperbole, exaggeration, there's a lot of metaphor. Now, you get into chapter 3 through 41, and it changes to more of poetry. That's why it's in the poetry section, because it's mostly poetry. And so we do see a lot of similarities. My life is like, this is hurting like. There's a lot of metaphor, a lot of water and wind and waves and fire and all of that stuff. So again, we take those literally to help us understand the message behind it. But I think that when it says there was a man in the land of Uz whose name was Job, there was a man in the land of Uz whose name was Job, and these things literally did happen to him.
So do we think Job wrote this? Do we think one of his friends wrote it?
Most people say Job, but I don't think there's really any way to know.
How about Moses?
Could be.
So that for the reading commentaries, Israel leaders are throwing him out as a possible author.
Yeah.
And it's like, what? But we get insight into God and Satan.
Yep.
Moses spent a lot of time with God in a relationship. Easily could have been told, hey, go write this down.
The other thing is that there's not a lot of historical context here, but like I mentioned, there's no Israel anywhere in here.
Right.
We see Job serving as the patriarch of his family, offering sacrifices for his family. The theology that we read about, that this is what they know about God, seems to fit sort of like in Abraham's day,
right.
Real patriarchal. And so if that's true, that makes Genesis, which Moses did write, the closest context in the Bible.
The Bible.
Yeah. You got
that.
Genesis, you got Job. I mean, they're like chronologically the first, really maybe say even the first 15 to 20 chapters of Genesis.
Yeah. Right.
That's sort of
well before. Yeah. So Abraham was like 15, right? It was somewhere around there.
Yeah,
That's
Abraham.
the Abrahamic covenant.
Yeah,
right?
Abraham
13,
shows
15.
up from about chapter 12, and he dies around chapter 25. So I would say it's probably the account of Job's life was probably within those 10 or so chapters of Genesis.
So we also see Abraham with a number of servants, a lot of animals.
Very ranchers.
Same thing as Job here,
Yep.
right? So same type of thing.
Well, what's interesting,
and also what'd you call it?
Patriarchal.
Yeah.
Patriarch. What's interesting is that he's called the greatest man, of all the people of the East. Well, from a Jewish perspective, place yourself in Israel and go east. What do you have? You have Jordan, you have Iraq, you have Iran, Kuwait, right? Where was basically Mesopotamia from the, Where was Abraham from? that exact same area. He was one of the greatest men of the East in his time. Job was one of the greatest men of the East in his time. There's a ton, not that they're certainly not the same guy, but there's a ton of overlap between their lives.
Okay. So we know that he's from the land of Uz, UZ. Do we and the eastern part of that? But do we take it south of Israel, or you're saying just east right off the bat?
There are a couple of places that place it, by the Dead Sea, right? And it's sort of Jordan area, modern Jordan. I don't know how far.
Right.
We would place Ur of the Chaldeans, where Abraham was from. That's sort of like modern Kuwait. So if you take basically from the Dead Sea over to the Persian Gulf, and go north, that's sort of that Mesopotamian area. That's where these guys are from.
Okay, so I think we hit a bunch of the stuff. Our first reading this week, we're going to be reading chapters 1, 2, and 3 in there. And like you said, in chapter 1, some horrendous things happen. I mean, we find out that Job has everything.
Yeah.
I mean, obviously he doesn't have everything, but is what we would deem at this time successful.
Yeah.
Right? He's got a large family. He's got an incredible amount of sheep and goats. And they list how many?
Thousands. Thousands of animals. And if you figure
the amount of area he needs.
Well, there's the area, just the grazing land. Yeah. But like say one shepherd could take care of 100 sheep, for instance. Well, if you got hundreds of 7,000 sheep, that's 70 people
that are just
minimum
taking care of the sheep.
Just doing that, and then you've got big. So he has an organization.
Yep.
Right, and Abraham did too. You've got tons of work. He's the CEO of a company.
Right.
He's got more employees working for him than most of the small businesses around here.
But yet he also has 10 kids.
Yeah.
And I think it was 7 boys and 3 girls that they named. And not that the kids are bad at all, but he worries about them.
Yeah.
Right. And they hold parties, and we find that Job is cleaning up after them, and giving, saying prayers to God. And,
he's making sacrifices just in case during one of their parties, one of them cursed God and whatever.
Right.
And that's his role at that time. That's his role as the priest of the family. I mean, he was the family priest. It was his responsibility. But that also means that the kids were all older.
Right.
They had a party at the oldest brother's house, and so this is not a young guy either.
Yeah.
This isn't some guy who just, came into money when he was in his 20s or whatever. He's built up an organization. He is well known. He's well respected. As we read through the book, we'll find out that even the old men stand up when he comes into town. He's well respected, well loved. He does a lot of good charity work, a lot of stuff. And one day he's sitting at home, and this isn't just a stock market crash.
Yeah, he loses everything.
Everything except for his wife and 4 servants.
Right. Who tell him he lost. He lost everything.
I alone. This phrase. This phrase just keeps pounding. I alone am left to tell you. And as he was talking, the next one came in, and I alone am left to tell you. And the next one came. I mean.
Right. So he loses all of his land, or he loses all of his animals.
Yeah.
And everybody who was taking care of the animals were killed. His kids were killed in a windstorm.
Yeah, knocks the place down. I mean, in our area, that's a tornado, right?
Right.
Tornado just destroys the whole area.
So 4 different ways, different subsets of people that were coming in and invading.
Yep.
And then, still in chapter 1, we now have a conversation between Satan and God.
Yeah, which is really neat because it gives us, like you said, an insight into, we do get sort of the behind the scenes director's cut of what's going on Earth, because Job didn't know it. I like to say Job didn't read chapters 1 and 2, right?
Right.
He lived part of it.
Yeah, he lived part of it and didn't know this behind the scenes thing that happened.
Yeah.
But there's a conversation between Satan and God, which is, even taking it out of Job, is like, wait, Satan and God talk to each other.
Yeah.
Right, but
Yeah, I know. It's for some people that's news.
Right.
Some people, they're people who
God
believe.
cannot be around anybody who sins.
Right.
Well,
Satan was cast out of heaven. Not yet. He's not.
Here's Satan.
Yeah. I know.
Right. So God calls. What do they call them? The
sons of God.
Sons of God.
Yeah.
Which we take as angels.
Yeah. And the reason that we do that is not because of chapters 1 and 2. But it's really because of chapter 38. The sons of God were there at the creation of the world, right? So it can't be people.
Right.
It
so
has to be,
who else was there?
Right.
Which would have been angels.
Yeah. So we look at chapter 38 and we backfeed that into here. And it makes a lot of sense that he would be with them. And you know what? Angels still have to report to God.
Right. So God calls a meeting of angels. Satan shows up.
Yeah.
So
what have you been up to?
There's a whole thing of Satan's listening to God.
Yeah, he has to. He has to obey. He's still, God can put him on as short or long of a leash as he wants to, but he can't go beyond the boundaries that God sets.
Right. Now we need to be a little bit careful, right? Because the text says, God says, what have you been doing?
Yeah.
Like he doesn't know what Satan has been doing.
Right.
Right. So, but you could interpret it as God wanted to know what Satan was doing.
Well, they have to give a report. I mean, think of it as it's not, like you said, it's not because God doesn't know, but it's the same way when we're going to stand before God, and Paul says in Romans 14, we will have to give an account of ourselves, not because God doesn't know, but because it's time to fess up.
Well, I take it as prayer too, as one of the big things of prayer is I get straight in my mind, either what I'm asking for or what I'm thinking, versus if I'm just thinking in my mind, I don't think about it too hard, but when I have to say those words, it's, do I really believe, what do I believe?
Yeah.
And what's the important piece for me? So, hey Satan.
Yeah.
What's the important piece for you?
Well, the funny thing is that he gives sort of a cagey answer. Oh, just wandering to and fro,
Yeah, but
which reminds me of 1 Peter 5, because the devil, like a prowling lion, walks about to and fro, seeking whom he may devour. Like, he found one.
Yeah. Well, yeah. So not only that, God offers him up. Have you considered?
Yeah.
Have you considered my servant Job?
Well, and the thing is that he had indeed considered him, because his response is, well, yeah, you've got him protected. I can't touch him.
Yeah.
Yeah, basically.
Yeah, so then God says, okay, just don't touch him.
Yeah.
The first go around.
Yeah.
Anything else you want to do is fair game.
Yep. He will curse you.
Yeah.
All right, well, let's...
So God sets... So did God cause this to happen? No. He has given Satan a box to operate in.
Yeah.
And what Satan does with that, Satan does with that.
Yeah.
Is that a fair way of saying that?
The fact that Satan already knew. I mean, he already had the list. He's like, well, yeah, but you do this, and you do this, and you do this. He's thought through it. He knows Job. He's wanted to get to this guy, and God has not allowed him to do it. Now God allows him to do it. Did God cause it? Absolutely not. He allowed it. And this is one of those big things that we still wrestle with today.
Yeah, exactly.
Does God cause sin? Does God cause trouble? Does God cause death and destruction and tornadoes and stuff? Or has God set a system in place that he allows to work within the parameters, and sometimes it's good and sometimes it's bad, but it's not like God is knocking over your house. A tornado used to be called the finger of God. Right? Cyclone or a tornado was called the finger of God because...
Never heard that.
Yeah. Does that mean that God goes through that trailer park or go through that housing, development, and he's like, I'm going to knock over yours, I'm going to knock over yours, I'm going to knock...
Yeah.
It's
like rolling dice to decide who to pick.
I don't think so.
Right.
I don't think so. God
you think
created...
it's more of a... he creates the sandbox.
Yeah.
And within that.
And the thing that we have to remember is that this is a cursed, sinful, fallen world.
Right.
right? This is not the world that he created. Yes, he created it, but this is not what he created. This is a very much a decayed version of what he created.
Yeah. I would also go to our path, where in the path, when we get to knowledge, self-control, perseverance, there's a test in there, right?
Yeah.
So we're good, tongue in cheek, but we decide that there is something that we need to change in our lives, but we're going to be tested on it.
Yeah.
How are we going to be tested? I mean, something bad is going to happen.
Something is going to happen.
Right.
Yeah.
There's going to be some kind of conflict that will force my decision one way or the other. So and we have no problem with that coming from God.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, we do have a problem with it, but
right.
yeah.
Right.
And in chapter 2, basically, it's almost like it seems like it's going to be a rehash of chapter 1. It's not. It goes to the next step. This time God says, okay, now, Satan is sort of ticked off because Job didn't curse God.
Right.
And he's like, well, that's because you didn't let me do everything I wanted to do. It's like, come on, dude,
Well, I do love, too, in the first statement, when they meet back together. By the way, Job's response, he tears his robe, he shaves his head, things that they would do there. Naked I came into this world, naked I go out. Mm-hmm. But may the Lord be blessed.
Yeah, blessed be the name of the Lord. I mean, that's where we get that song and so many songs.
So he didn't sin, and he didn't charge God with, you are wrong for this.
Yeah, this time.
So again, there's another conversation, and God says, wait, you stirred me up before for no reason, almost poking the bear, right?
Yeah.
Poking Satan.
Yeah.
And again, Satan comes back with, well, you wouldn't let me touch him.
Yeah.
If you let me touch him, he's going to curse you.
Yep.
Yeah, so that's when he comes back with, all right, just don't kill him.
Yeah.
This time. Satan strikes with ulcers from soles of his feet to the top of his head.
Boils,
so his whole body.
Yeah, he can't stand, he can't sit, he can't lay down, he can't, just covered with these things.
Yeah, and it's so bad he's taking a shard of a broken pot and using it to scratch all of his itches.
Well, and as we read further, as he'll actually describe this a little bit more, this is what I'm going through. He says that they're worms. He says that they're breaking open. He's going to go outside and live outside the city limits, or outside the homestead there, sort of in the dump. Yep. And his friends are going to show up toward the end of chapter 2, and it says that they couldn't even, they knew him. They've done business together. They got together when they heard that he was sick, because they heard that he was sick. They heard that he had lost his, whatever.
Right.
They got together, we got to go help him. They didn't even recognize him. He was so bad. He was mutilated bodily, emotionally, spiritually, mentally. Everything was crushed.
Right. So, but before that, you had said his wife is still there.
Yeah.
So what's his wife say?
Well, his wife, I think she really gets a bad rap, because his wife says, just curse God and die.
Well, that's a pretty good reason to get a bad rap.
I know, but the thing is that
is it just get it over with?
That's how I read it. If you were going through this, what would your wife say? I don't want to see you go through this anymore. Yeah. You know the way out. You know that if you curse God, he has to kill you. Again, misapplied theology, right?
Yep. But even of the time.
Yeah. So just get it over with. Just curse God and die. I think it's out of her love for him, or her sense of, what can I do? I can't do anything to help.
Well, but also we need to remember, whatever Job went through, she went through. Maybe not the ulcer, but
right.
She lost everything.
Her kids, right. And people really miss. I think that's a great observation. People forget.
Yeah. Because it is about Job.
Yeah, because she shows up, curse God and die. She is going through all the same grief. Plus, like you said, she doesn't have the boils, she doesn't have the sores, but her husband does.
Right.
And they've been married for a while because they have 10 grown kids.
Right.
Yeah.
Okay, so now we're to the point where Job has basically lost everything but his wife, and like you said,
four
four servants.
I alone am left.
Now, 3 friends come from different countries. Right?
Yeah, or at least different regions around Middle East.
And my thought process is you got 7,000 sheep. You need a country, or a county, At least, and they take a lot of areas. So these guys, even though they could be living next to each other, they're going to have their own land.
Yeah.
They're going to have to defend it.
These are let's say fellow CEOs, fellow sheiks or whatever that other great men.
Yep.
They've done business with him, and as we read through the book, they know him really well. I mean, these aren't just like get well cards. These are friends.
Yeah. So they come, and for the first 7 days, they seem to just sit there.
Well, because they didn't really understand how bad it was.
Yeah.
They had heard, wow, there was a tornado, knocked the house down, he lost his kids, something happened with his animals, and now he's sick too.
Yeah.
But they show up, and it says they were going to give him some counsel and, some encouragement.
Which you would, right? As CEOs, you know, that's kind of your role. Is people come to you?
They might have been board members,
Yeah. Well, so now they're coming, seeing something way worse than they've ever seen,
and they didn't have any words.
Right, and as a guy thing, so you just shut up and sit there. Let's just see how this plays out for a while.
Yeah. Well, it says, but they wept loudly. They didn't recognize him. They tore their robes. They threw the dust in the air over their heads. They were not in as much grief as he was, but they were grieving with him.
Right. So, and there is, as bad as it is, I mean, multiple people grieving. There is some consolation in there, and some camaraderie.
All right. So that sets up everything else that is now to come.
Yeah.
Right.
Right.
Okay. There's really no more. There's very little. Like I said, chapter 42. But there's no more narrative. There's no more. So what happened next? We're going to go through conversation after conversation after conversation with these guys.
Right.
Right. For most of the book.
Yep. Yeah. So chapter 3 is all Job.
Yeah.
Right. So Job finally starts talking
after at least a week.
Yeah. Yeah. And it seems like. Not to read all of chapter 3, but he's definitely regretting the day he was born. He wishes that he would die at birth, or he should have died at birth, and he longs for his death.
Yeah.
Are those sins?
I don't think so. I think at one point or another, all of us wonder if we make any impact in this world, if would this world, maybe we never get to the point where we're actually saying,
a Wonderful Life. Is that where you're going?
Did
I make a difference?
Yeah, did I make a difference? Have I made an impact? Would anybody miss me if I were gone? And maybe not everybody gets to the point of It's a Wonderful Life. I'm going to go jump off a bridge. In my, people would be better if I weren't here type thing. But we've all, I think, at one point or another, wondered if we've made any impact at all.
Yeah. So verse 23 in there, I just want to read this one verse. It kind of sums it up, right? Why is light given to a man whose way is hidden and whom God has hedged in? So the way I read that is, as a man, I got something great. I got this light, but now it's hidden and I can't use it, right? It's like taken away from me.
Yeah.
So why even give it to me in the first place?
Yeah.
What's the point of that?
See, what's funny about that,
I kind of get it.
Is that I don't know if this was intentional, but the way Satan first described Job was that God had put a hedge of protection around him. God had hedged him in.
Right.
And now Job is saying,
that is funny.
I'm hedged in. I can't. And I don't know if it's the exact same Hebrew word or whatever, but this concept where Job thinks, I'm stuck here. And Satan's accusation was, you've got him stuck there and I can't get to him.
Yeah.
And before it was fine. He didn't have any problem with that. He didn't know.
Right.
And now
he's stuck. Yeah. So there's a lot of questions in chapter 3.
Yeah.
I don't see any answers.
No. No.
Right? So
And
I think that's a lot of what Job is.
and I think that that's okay, because really, whenever we're in trouble, no matter what our trouble is that we face, that's where we start, right? All questions and no answers.
Right.
And then people start showing up and trying to give answers, and they may be good and they may be bad, but we always start with, this is out of my control. I don't understand why. Why is that big question that often doesn't get answered at all,
Right.
beyond a couple of what some people think is just platitudes.
Well, and people want to know, right? Somebody dies of great importance. Why? It doesn't make any sense. I agree.
Yeah.
But I don't know that we'll ever know.
Yeah.
That the specific answer on why that person died that way at that point in time.
Yeah.
Nor does God owe it to us.
Right. But the fact, I used the term earlier, the director's cut. The fact that we sort of get to see this behind the scenes here should help us remember that our story also has a behind the scenes that we don't get to see.
Right.
There
Right. There's bigger
is
things
something going on. There's a bigger thing. God is there. God's not caught off guard by any of this. You know, and he's quiet for a long, long time, and he lets Job rant, and he lets these guys give bad advice and all sorts of things before he finally steps in. And I think that's one of the big patterns that we're looking for here.
So you think it's a matter of trust?
I think
And God's giving us time to work it out on our own?
Yeah.
Because I always assume people are a lot like me. If you're just given the answer, but if you work for it, that's when it has meaning. That's when it has depth.
Yeah.
That's when you work things out.
Yeah, we're going to have a lot of questions. There are some answers. There's going to be some philosophy. There's going to be a ton of great theology in here. There is so much good information about God here that we need to learn, that is just really cool throughout this book. But we are going to go a little slow, and we are going to give ourselves the opportunity to wrestle with some of these things, because this is stuff that we still do today.
Yeah, definitely.
And
I'm looking forward to it.
Yeah, so we're going to end this week's reading with all questions and no answers. And so if that's not
Perfect
like
for
life, maybe you invite your friends and family and whatever to watch these videos and pay attention and join in. This one you might find that people will be interested in, even if they haven't been interested so far, because these are things that affect us all. And so invite them, share the links so that they can enjoy it as well. And as you have questions, we won't give answers, because apparently God doesn't give answers. No, we'll try to wrestle with those things. If you have things about Job that you'd like to find out more about, either mention it in the comments here, or you can contact us directly, and we'll look forward to spending some time in this book with you. So, see you soon.
See you next week.